Hi everyone, welcome to Ask a Property Manager episode number 80. Today is July 21st, 2021, and we are coming to you from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo. I'm Andrew Schultz, Principal Broker of Own Buffalo Inc., and on today's show we're going to be talking about flooring options for affordable housing, how to screen a self-employed applicant for an apartment, we'll answer some questions from landlords and housing providers around the country, and so much more. Before we jump into all of that, we are going to go ahead and plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager come out every Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Buffalo Foreclosed Homes. You can also catch the replay the same day over on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/OwnBuffalo. Don't forget to check out our Instagram. Things get posted there that don't make it to our other two platforms. And last but not least, don't forget about the current episode of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. This week we are taking a look at how to raise rents when you are below market value, the steps that you need to take when you're completing repairs in an occupied apartment, and what to do when a tenant requests that you be physically present for all repairs. So don't miss out on that one. New episodes of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast drop every other Thursday morning, anywhere podcasts can be heard, or over at rentprep.com/podcast. We're going to go ahead and jump right into our news of the day here, starting with this article from CNBC. Builders pull back as more home buyers are priced out of the market. We'll go ahead and jump in here. There are several signs in the market for newly built homes that point to a potential slowdown for the nation's home builders. Data released Tuesday added to the evidence that builders are pulling back. Single-family housing starts continued to rise in June, many of those for homes already sold, but building permits, an indicator of future construction, fell more than expected last month to the lowest point since August and were 100,000 units below the 6-month average, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The single-family market in particular desperately needs more new homes, especially on the lower end where first-time home buyers need some price relief and more supply choices. But we also know that it's getting more and more difficult to deliver from a builder's perspective at the wanted price points, said Peter Bookvar, I'm going to say it's Bookvar, I might be pronouncing that wrong, Chief Investment Officer at Bleakley Advisory Group. You know, not for nothing, I read these articles every time before we get into the stories of the day, and every single time I read these last names and I think to myself, you need to figure out that last name's pronunciation before you get on the air. Every single time I forget to do it. Elsewhere in the market, mortgage applications to purchase a newly built home dropped nearly 24% in June year over year, according to the MBA, the Mortgage Bankers Association. That was the third consecutive month of decline. Home builders are encountering stronger headwinds as of late, as severe price increases for key building materials, rising regulatory costs, and labor shortages impact their ability to raise production. This has dampened new home sales and quickened home price growth, said Joel Kahn, an MBA economist. The average loan amount also hit another record high at $392,370. In addition to price increases, we're also seeing fewer purchase transactions in the lower price tiers, as more of those potential buyers are being priced out of the market, further exerting upward pressure on loan balances, he said. The latest developments come after the coronavirus pandemic produced the hottest year for both housing demand and home construction in more than a decade. Builder sentiment, while still high, dropped in July, with builders citing continued pressure on construction costs. Lumber prices, which shot up during the pandemic and hit a record high just a few months ago, have fallen back dramatically. So far, however, the savings has not trickled down to consumers or builders. Prices for other materials are also still rising. The recent weakening of single-family and multifamily permits is due to the higher material costs, which have pushed new home prices higher since the end of last year, said Robert Dietz, chief economist at the National Association of Home Builders. This is a challenge for a housing market that needs additional inventory. Builders are also hampered by both supply chain and labor issues. Reports of multi-month delays in delivery of windows, heating units, refrigerators, and other items have popped up across the country, delaying delivery of homes and forcing builders to cap activity. Many builders continue to point to a shortage of available workers as a separate challenge. The median price of a new home in May was up 18%, compared with May 2020, according to the census. Prices for existing homes are also up in double digits from a year ago. While mortgage rates have dropped significantly in the past few weeks, it is not enough to make up for those big price gains. I'm going to go ahead here, and there were a couple things that I wanted to touch on. We'll go ahead and highlight this as well. And where was the lumber prices thing? I want to talk about lumber prices too. And there we go. All right, so there's 3 points that I wanted to touch on in this article. In addition to home prices increasing, we're also seeing fewer purchase transactions in the lower tiers as more of these potential buyers are being forced out of the market, further exerting upward pressure on loan balances. That's definitely happening. Being a first-time home buyer in this market is incredibly challenging because the cost, or rather the price of the market, is swiftly increasing, which is pricing a lot of first-time home buyers completely out of the market altogether, which is unfortunate. The only thing that's going to stop that is prices coming down on existing homes or construction of new homes in the first-time home buyer price range, which tends to be on the lower end of the market. The problem is, as you get further into the article, the cost of building materials has gone up and the cost of labor has gone up, which makes it a lot more difficult to deliver a home at, X number of dollars per square foot, simply because the cost of the materials and the cost of the labor prohibit you from getting to that price point. So that's kind of an issue that has been going on essentially the entire pandemic, with lumber prices jumping up as much as they have. One thing that was mentioned here, lumber prices, which shot up during the pandemic and hit a record high just a few months ago, have fallen back dramatically. So far, however, that savings has not trickled down to consumers or builders. Prices for other building materials are also still rising. I can say that I watch the price of 2x4s at Home Depot here locally every single week. I check it on a weekly basis to see, are we trending up? Are we trending down? And when lumber futures dropped, I anticipated that it would be about a full quarter before we would start to see that in the consumer market. And I'm going to say I'm wrong, and I'm going to say that this article is wrong, because the price of lumber, at least here locally, has started to come down. Other building materials are still very, very elevated, but I will say that I am starting to see lumber prices come back down. There were times where we were seeing lumber as high as $8, $9, $10 for a 2x4. I'm now seeing that somewhere in the $5 to $6 range right now. So it's starting to come back down. We're never going to get back to $2 and $3 2x4s, I don't think, but we are starting to see at least a little bit of that burden let up. Last but not least, reports of multi-month delay in delivery of windows, heating units, refrigerators, and other items that popped up across the country, et cetera, et cetera. We've talked about this on the show before, and we've actually experienced it quite a few times over the course of the last year, actually 18 months, as we've been running our property management operations. Trying to get a hold of refrigerators, especially early pandemic, was nearly impossible. Everybody was going out and stockpiling food, which meant that they were also stockpiling refrigerators and chest freezers and stuff like that, which led to a shortage combined with lack of labor due to the coronavirus and et cetera. So it's a ripple effect, essentially, is what I'm saying. That's starting to come back now. It's getting to the point where when we need an appliance, we could generally get our hands on an appliance. It's not perfect. There's still a lot of things that are slow. The supply chains are definitely still interrupted around the world, but it's starting to get better. So hopefully things continue to improve here. Hopefully new home builders are able to build some new homes. Hopefully they're able to build those homes in the first-time home buyer segment, the lower end of the market, so that we can start dealing with some of this backlog of housing need. We're going to go ahead and jump to an article with a little bit more local flair. This one comes to us via Buffalo Business First. We'll grab a little iced coffee before we continue. Canadian developer Harry Stinson wants to build a $105 million condo tower next to his downtown hotel. Canadian developer Harry Stinson, who owns downtown Buffalo's largest hotel, now plans to build the city's largest condo tower. Stinson wants to build a 25-story, 400-unit condo tower on a vacant parcel adjoining his Buffalo Grand Hotel once the Adams mark Buffalo. The $105 million project would be where Lower Terrace and Charles Streets meet next to the hotel and the parking ramp. My sense is that there is a larger pent-up market for condos in Buffalo than most realize, said Stinson of Hamilton, Ontario. He expects to file permits with the City of Buffalo in the next 3 months. Applications to the New York State Attorney General's office are also being prepared, he said. The condo project replaces an earlier proposal by Stinson to convert 200 of the Buffalo Grand's 486 hotel rooms into apartments and condos. Now all 486 rooms will remain as a hotel. I found that converting an older property into condos was a lot more complex than I first thought, he said. It's actually easier to build new in this case. Construction is the easy part. It's the bureaucracy that drives me crazy. We certainly have plenty of that here. Stinson has hired Lauer Manguso Associates of Amherst to design the condo tower and retain Adam Walters of Phillips Lytle LLP to handle the state and city approvals. The final design should be ready for later this summer. For this type of project, I want a design that's quite striking, he said. The condo tower will have a lobby and underground parking, but tenants will also be able to use some of the Buffalo Grand amenities, such as the indoor pool. The tower would have a mix of studio, 1 and 2 bedroom condos. Sale prices tentatively will range from the $200,000 to $500,000 price range, depending on market conditions. The key to the project will be pre-sales, which can't happen until the State Attorney General's office signs off on the prospectus and various Buffalo approvals are recorded, he said. Nothing can happen until we get all of the documents we need, and that's easily 6 months away, if not longer, Stinson said. In the public's eye, you may not see a lot happening, but we have a lot going on behind the scenes. The condo tower is the centerpiece of a multi-phased effort to renovate hotel rooms and event space in the Buffalo Grand Hotel and to construct a glass wedding chapel. My first order of business is to get the hotel in order and back to functioning as a hotel as we all envisioned, he said. Stinson's also working on a $30 million renovation of the 98-year-old former Wonder Bread factory on Ferguson Street into a residential mixed-use building. Construction won't begin on that until mid-2022, he said. Historic tax credits are pending. So going right along with our previous article, this does have the ability to add 400 units of condo into the city of Buffalo, which is pretty substantial. I mean, they say it right here. It's the largest condo tower in the city, which is impressive enough. And then you talk about 400 units. That's a lot of new housing. That's a big housing start. Condos, I believe, would technically be constituted as single family when you talk about housing starts. This is a good thing for the city of Buffalo, no matter how you slice it. This is one of those situations where Buffalo stands to come out on top. I know that there are going to be a lot of, preservationists that are going to come out. I can think of one in particular. But as soon as I read that they're planning on moving the parking to underground, I think that that'll help to make them happy, because we're not using surface land for cars, which is one of the biggest issues that we have. One of the biggest issues we have in the eyes of preservationists and people who are looking for green walkable communities, things like that. It sounds like they're trying to make this as dense, as residentially dense and as green as possible by making sure that we're not wasting a ton of surface space on parking lots. So that's good news. Obviously, it's going to be new building materials. It's going to be new building tactics, which most preservationists don't love. But right now, I believe it said the lot is just sitting there vacant. It's just a vacant lot. So hopefully this happens. I would be super excited to see that happen. I love seeing new development here in the city of Buffalo. Take a look at a couple of things that I found funny from around the internet. This was really cool. Not so much funny, but I just thought this was so cool and I wanted to share it. German graffiti artist painted a 250 square meter bridge to make it look like it was made out of Lego. As somebody who grew up in the Lego generation and still has quite a few Legos, not that I should have displayed that publicly, but I do love my Legos. I just thought that was really cool and I wanted to share that. And then this is a little bit funny. I can think of quite a few places that I've walked through here in the city of Buffalo that look just like this. I think I pulled this off of the Rent Prep for Landlords group, but that was a pretty funny one too. We're going to go ahead and jump into our questions from housing providers around the country here. We're going to start with this one on flooring for affordable housing. I was finally able to evict a tenant post-COVID. They basically left a hoarder's level pigsty. We're cleaning it out and getting it ready for new tenants. The question is what to do with the floors. We have to replace all of them. In the past, we've had carpet, but we're thinking of replacing with linoleum or laminate. This is affordable housing, so we don't want to over-renovate, but at the same time, we're concerned about always having to replace carpet. Any suggestions for an affordable alternative to carpet for an entire row home? My recommendation here is going to be vinyl plank flooring. Especially in affordable housing, vinyl plank flooring is a lot less maintenance. Carpets get destroyed quickly, as you're discovering right now. Carpet is one of those things that you can almost guarantee that you're going to have to replace it more frequently than you would any sort of a vinyl or a durable flooring surface. We've had great luck with vinyl flooring, vinyl plank flooring. We use a local supplier and a local installer, but there are a ton of great options right at your local big box store if that's what you have available. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pull up, let me change back to desktop here. This is Home Depot. And you have a ton of different options here depending on what you're looking for. This is all a vinyl plank flooring. This is not rolled flooring, and we'll get into why in a minute. But you have options ranging from, let me sort low to high. You have options ranging from as low as 98 cents a square foot, $1.39 a square foot. Where's the stuff that I like, the Traffic Master stuff? I'm curious to see where that kind of falls into place here. Let's just do this. Traffic Master vinyl plank. There we go. This is the Traffic Master stuff that we like. We've had a lot of good luck with this over the years. It's relatively reasonably priced. It's not going to be as inexpensive as carpet, but you're going to get a lot more lifespan out of a vinyl product than you are out of a carpet, where you're going to have to replace that carpet before you know it. Jumping back to the question here, if you were not going to do a vinyl plank for whatever reason, there are some other options out there. My next pick would probably be hardwood. The problem with hardwood is very expensive to install. And if somebody does damage to it, you pretty much have to, sand it down and refinish it to get it back to a point where it looks good again. So hardwood, not as easy as vinyl plank, where you can just rip out one piece and put a new piece in. It's a lot more maintenance heavy on hardwoods when you start talking about having to refinish them and things of that nature. I've also seen people do ceramic tile or porcelain tile throughout an entire home. Typically, I'll see that more in the southern climates where it's a little bit warmer weather. I don't see a ton of that up here in like Buffalo, Western New York, any of the cold weather climate areas. Personally, I don't care for that look. I don't like the way that cold tile feels during the winter. I wouldn't do that in a cold weather climate. Maybe if you were talking about a southern climate, a warm weather climate, something like that, maybe I would consider a tile all the way through, but personally, I just don't like the way it looks. I do recommend avoiding sheet vinyl or linoleum unless it's a very, very small area, like maybe a 5-foot by 7-foot bathroom or something like that, and even that's kind of pushing it. Honestly, the only real use I have for sheet vinyl at this point is underneath of sinks to prevent there from being any damage to like the bottom board of a sink. That's where I would use sheet vinyl, but I don't like it on floors, and the reason for that is it tends to move and it tends to rip. We had just installed brand new sheet vinyl in one of our apartments, and someone moved a refrigerator, and the caster on the refrigerator was enough to cause damage to the sheet vinyl underneath. As silly as that sounds, we had a rip in a brand new piece of sheet vinyl, and ever since then, I've just said, you know what, sheet vinyl's not worth it. Even if you go with the thicker stuff, it just simply doesn't make sense. So when you're talking about going back to the vinyl plank flooring, don't forget to grab that extra box or a couple of extra boxes when you're doing your job so that you have a little bit of extra for errors. We usually recommend 10% extra for errors, and then you may want to grab a box just to have on hand in case you need to swap out a plank down the road. Moving on to our next question here on ozone generators. So many of you have read about our nightmare tenants who trashed their unit and have finally moved on. We're dealing with a persistent odor issue even after pulling up the one carpet, likely because of the food filth everywhere, even on the walls, and have decided to buy an ozone machine. Any advice? I've done some research and it looks like the odor-free Villa 3000 may be right for us. It creates ozone by Corona, not UV, which we have read is best. Anyone have any experience with this unit or another that will do over 2,000 square foot? I know we can rent one, but having read many posts, it seems like owning one isn't a bad idea. We have 9 doors. So ozone generators are great for eliminating tough smells from rentals. We have one. We've owned one for a lot of years now. We found that they work great for like heavy cooking smells, pet odor, general funk, just to give something a little bit of a fresher smell. Ozone generators work great for that purpose. The one thing people don't realize is that the ozone generator is not a miracle worker. You have to do all of your other cleanup first before you run your ozone generator. So if you need to pull a carpet because it's pet damaged, you got to pull that carpet first. If you have, a heavy, greasy kitchen because of, somebody cooking and not cleaning up after themselves for an extended period of time, you have to do the grease cleanup before you run your ozone generator, or you're not going to get rid of the smell. The ozone generator doesn't take the place of doing all your cleaning. The ozone generator is kind of the last step in the process, if you will. You're also going to want to make sure that you run the thing in multiple areas of the house, and you're going to run it multiple times. It's not as though one cycle is necessarily going to take care of it. You're going to want to be able to run it a couple of times in a couple of different areas to help eliminate smells from one end of the place to the other. You do not want to run this in an occupied apartment. So nothing with people, pets, or plants. You want all 3 out of the space before you run the ozone generator, because you could cause serious respiratory harm, or death. You can literally destroy someone's lungs with one of these machines. After the machine runs its cycle, you have to wait until it's done and then some. I typically tell people if you run a 2-hour cycle, make sure that you don't re-enter the space for a total of 4 hours. 2 hours for the cycle, 2 hours for cooldown, if you will. And the reason for that is the space is still not safe to enter just as soon as that machine turns off. The air is still heavily ozonized. You need to wait for the oxygen to return to the space before you re-enter it, or you could be causing some damage to yourself. So do not run it in a place with people, with pets, or with plants. Remove all three. Understand that you could cause some serious respiratory damage if you do that. Read the damn instructions. It's not that complicated. They're very simple machines. Typically, they have 1 or 2 knobs on them. But if you don't read the instructions, then you really could put yourself or others in harm's way. These are a great investment for a couple $100 if you have a couple of rental properties. Honestly, even if you only have 1 rental property, if it's something where you're turning it over, on a yearly basis, bi-yearly basis, for the amount of money you're going to spend to go rent one of these, you're better off to just go buy one, and then you have it on hand. My pro tip here, if I could throw a little bit of extra advice, is you can also use these to make a car smell like brand new again, but you have to run it in very, very, very short cycles. 15 to 30 minutes maximum when you put it in a car. Otherwise, you risk damaging the interior. If you have a leather interior, it'll eat the leather. It'll pull all the moisture out of your leather. If you have like a vinyl interior or vinyl dashboard, it could cause damage to the vinyl. So very short cycles, 15 to 30 minutes. Obviously, make sure that you let it run through the cycle and then let the cycle complete. So if you run it for 15 minutes, don't open that door until after 30 minutes. But you can make your car smell good, just like brand new, with using one of these ozone generators. Just my 2 cents, just my little pro tip for you. On to our third question, screening self-employed applicants, and this is a twofer. We have 2 questions here. What does everyone require for proof of income for those applicants that work for themselves? And then the second question regarding applications, do you require every person over the age of 18 to submit an application and pay the fee? E.g., a couple equals 2 applications times $35 equals 70. So we'll start with the first one. What do we require for proof of income for self-employed individuals? The answer to that is pretty straightforward. We want at least the previous year's tax return for them personally. We also want a year-to-date profit and loss for them personally, as well as bank statements for the current year showing disbursements to them. So since we're in July at the time of this recording, I want to see January to July's bank statements showing the disbursements that they've actually received. I want to see last year's 2020 personal tax return so that I can see what are they reporting as actual income, gross and net on their taxes. Obviously understand that self-employed people have a ton of write-offs and things like that. The tax picture can get a little bit skewed, which is why I want to see both the taxes and I want to see their current year P&L for them personally and their bank statements so that I can verify everything across the board. Essentially, I want to know, what is this person actually bringing in? What is this person working with personally in their bank account to pay their bills? A lot of people talk about, oh, well, why, I want to know more about the company and blah, blah, blah. The company's not the one paying their rent. They're responsible for paying their rent. I want to see what their personal income is. I want to see what their personal year-to-date looks like, and I want to see what their personal tax statements say, because that's who you're actually renting to, is the person and not the company. If you're renting to the company, then yeah, now you need to start talking about looking at the company's profit and loss and maybe some tax returns for the company and things like that. That's a totally separate issue. Maybe we'll jump into that in a future episode. But when you're talking about dealing with somebody self-employed, that's the easiest way to do it, is with the previous year's tax return, followed by their current year's profit and loss for them personally, as well as bank statements for the current year showing what the disbursements are that they have received. One thing that I do want to mention is that this applies to Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, Postmates, any of those delivery services, anything along those lines. That is considered self-employment. That is not a true employee-employer relationship. They can come and go as they please when they're working. They pick their own start and stop times. They control all of their own expenses. They're their own self-employed person. So this same thing would apply to somebody who's running Uber or Lyft or whatever else. They are a small business, whether or not they understand that. They do have income and expenses. So if you're only looking at that person's income, which is a gross number, keep in mind, there's no taxes being taken out of that, you're not seeing the whole picture. It's a problem with Uber and Lyft. They're also terrible at generating reports to be able to show what the revenue to the drivers actually is. So you basically wind up dealing with screen caps from these apps and then trying to verify it against bank statements. It's a real headache trying to do Uber or Lyft or any of those, trying to do a verification on any of that. It's a real headache. Not to mention the income is inconsistent. You might work 40 hours driving one week and 10 hours driving the next week, and you might make the same amount in both weeks. I mean, it's very inconsistent that way. So when you're doing a screening on one of these self-employed applicants, especially an Uber or a Lyft or something along those lines, just make sure you're taking your time and getting it right. For the second question, do you require every person over the age of 18 to submit an application? Yes, we do. Everyone over the age of 18 has to submit a rental application and is subject to the credit and to the background check. So, and that's anyone over the age of 18. Check your state law as to what you can charge as far as fees, whether it has to be an application fee or if it's only for credit and background checks, if there's any maximum on it. At least here in the state of New York, the term application fee is a no-no anymore. You have to call it a credit and background check fee, and you're only allowed to charge the cost of the credit and background check fee up to $20. If it's less than $20, you can only charge what it costs. So that's kind of a headache. It actually costs us more on a per application basis to run our credit and background checks than we receive. We're not even covering our expenses on it anymore. It's kind of a headache. So a little bit short-sighted in that piece of legislation. Thank you, New York State Legislator. Anyway, moving forward, the other thing I want to mention is that on our applications, we do have a no blank spaces policy. We want everything filled in on our applications, even if there's just an NA, a not applicable. At least that way we know there was an answer made to the question. And if we have somebody that submits an application with a bunch of blank spaces, generally speaking, that's going to be a red flag. That pretty much wraps things up for this week's episode of the Ask a Property Manager Show. Thank you all so much for joining us. We truly do appreciate it. I love producing Ask a Property Manager, and you can help us to improve by dropping a question in the comments below, either on Facebook or on YouTube, and your question may be answered in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content, or if we brought some value to your day, do us a favor and hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, subscribe, and share helps us to grow and reach more people. We'll be back next week on Wednesday, July 28th at 10 a.m. Eastern with another show you won't want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.